So hey guys, welcome back to Sceammeupbotty. We're going to get into another little chat about season 1 of the original Star Trek series. And just before we get into it, I want to draw your attention over to the main website for Coins Age Media and check out some of the stuff that's going on over there. I'm working on a few things now that will possibly happen, hopefully within the next couple of years. It's going to be a long process. I've got no problem with that. It is what it is whenever you're doing this sort of thing. It doesn't happen overnight, so get over there, check out some of that stuff. If you're interested, you can get involved somewhere or another in it, but for now we're just going to be doing the content for you guys, the free podcasts and that there. We're going to be enjoying chatting about science fiction in a big bad way on the show. And for now, for the foreseeable future, it's going to be Star Trek based, but somewhere along the line we're going to get into other science fiction shows. So let's get into this little chat about Miri, episode 8 of the original series of Star Trek. So guys, I really did enjoy this series, and interestingly enough, while I was doing my research on it, I discovered that the BBC in the UK here actually banned this episode. I'm a lifelong Star Trek fan, but in all fairness, at this point, I'm like a skim the surface sort of a fan of the show. But there's quite a few episodes and the whole run of it, particularly in Deep Space Nine, that I haven't seen. But it's interesting just to come across some of the information about these shows. Whenever this show came out back in '66, it was a different time, and it was well before the whole cancel culture thing that's happening these days, where everybody's getting just offended at absolutely everything. It's going to be a killer for these types of shows moving forward, in all fairness. And even back then, pre-internet, we're obviously getting a lot of complaints about the show. The research that I done online here, that says following the first screening of Miri on British television in December 1970, the BBC received a number of complaints regarding the episode's content. Now, there's a few things in there where there's a lot of violence involved in there. Captain Kirk takes an awful hammering at one point from the kids in the show. And in all fairness, from a parent's perspective, children enjoyed this show in a major way, and it does actually say this later on in this little bit of research. You can see from a parent's perspective, if their child was watching this show, they might feel that they need to put a complaint on. The quantity and nature of the complaints were never made public. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, the BBC chose not to include the episode Miri in repeat runs of Star Trek, along with 3 other episodes, which were Plato's Stepchildren, The Empath, and Whom God Destroys. Fans writing to the BBC to complain about the ban during the show's repeat run in the 1980s. Its 5th showing altogether and repeats, received the standard reply that there are no plans to screen the 4 episodes because we feel that they deal with mostly unpleasant and already unpleasant subjects of madness, torture, sadism and disease. Of course, in Miri there's a global pandemic happening, and sounds familiar, doesn't it, guys? You will appreciate that account must be taken that out of Star Trek's large and enthusiastic following, many are juveniles who would watch the programme no matter what time of the day the series is put on and the programme schedule, and this is a BBC statement. However, the ban was finally lifted for the BBC's next showing of the series in the early 90s. In 2020 it was also shown in Britain on the horror channel, which is currently still is to this day. Anyway, the episode itself, the Enterprise answers a distress call from a planet, and when they get there, they discover it resembles Earth in a major way, and a Latin party of Captain Kirk, Spock, Dr. McCoy, Yeoman Janice Rand, and 2 security officers beam down to the planet, and they find an abandoned 1960 style Earth. Shortly after getting there, they're attacked by this disfigured guy, and after Kirk and him fight each other, the man has seizures and dies on the spot. And noises draw the landing party to an abandoned building where they discover a pre-adolescent Miri, this young girl. The name of the episode's named after, who has run away from them because Grups, as she calls them, which they work out that actually means grown-ups. The Grups that were originally on the planet killed and maimed children before dying because of this plague. She and her friends, the Onlys, as they call themselves, because they're the only ones left, they're all hiding, and the distress call is traced to an automatic signal that was sent out from the planet whenever this all started to unfold. The landing party, except for Spock, notice purple lesions on their bodies, and Miri tells them that those are the first signs of the disease, and they will soon become like the other adults. They'll go crazy, start killing people, and eventually die. The party find a medical research laboratory and look through the documents for clues to the disease, and discover that it is a side effect of a life extension experiment that the scientists on the planet were working on, affecting those who reach puberty. Death follows a brief period of violent madness. The children they discover because of this experimentation are actually over 300 years old at this point. The plan for this thing was to extend life and make the aging process a little bit slower. So these kids, even though they're looking about 12 to 15 years old, are in fact over 300 years old. Pretty much aging 1 month every century. Every 100 years they only age a month. That's crazy. So like an eternal childhood, you may as well say at this point. These kids are running about on this planet, so it's kind of hard to pinpoint the exact time period for everything that's happening in the show. They show the mental and emotional maturity of their biological age rather than their actual age. And when the disease begins, its victims have 7 days to live. Although Spock is apparently immune, he considers himself a carrier who could infect the Enterprise if he returns. So they're stuck on this planet with equipment that's not really designed to deal with the situation they're in, and they're having to use, they're having to beam down equipment from the Enterprise and do whatever studies they can there, and then send the information back to the Enterprise computers via the communicators to work out how to get a cure for this. They can't leave the planet, they can't bring anybody else down, they can't infect Enterprise. Kirk uses his charm on Miri to persuade her to show him to the other children. Now, in all fairness, in the show itself, Captain Kirk, he's the woman's man. He's forever, and pretty much most of the episodes, Captain Kirk will have a romantic interest with someone on the show, some female character, and he does use charm on Miri, and I think that could quite possibly have been one of the complaints for parents watching the show and getting it banned from the BBC, because it's almost, he discovers that Miri has a crush on him, and he uses that to pretty much get her to help him throughout the episode. And it is that fine line between, there's a very, very fine line there where it's just, you know why he's doing it. Miri is not going to be in any harm in any way, shape or form from Captain Kirk, but there is that creepiness level to it as well. So I can see that as been, something that parents would be a little bit disgusted about in the episode. He uses his charms to get her to persuade him to show him the other children. However, mistrustful of the grups, the grown-ups, they disperse when Kirk and Miri approach their hideout. John, the eldest boy and the leader of the children, which I found really weird watching this episode, because the only other thing I could put this guy into was the Bill Murray Christmas movie, Scrooged. Do you remember the old guy, the homeless dude, that was, begging for some money to earn his keep in the movie, and then later on Bill Murray finds as this guy frozen to death down in the sewers. This is the guy that is the oldest of the children in this episode, and he just, he even at that age, this episode is, it's going back to 1966. Scrooge was in 1988, 89, if memory serves, and even at that age, seeing him back here in this episode of Star Trek, you just know as soon as he walks on the screen who it is, and it was just kind of weird to see him. He's the leader of the children in the episode, and he eventually steals the Lantern Party's communicators, rendering McCoy's search for a cure impossible, without Enterprise computers to help him out. When Human Rand panics, this has happened, they're infected, they're gonna die within 7 days. They're already adults when they got it. They've got a 7-day lifespan at this point. She freaks out. They're impending doom, essentially, and Kirk, of course, trying to be the level-headed captain, he comforts her. He's got his arms around her, give her a hug, and in the background we can see Miri looking at the two of them. Of course, she has her little first crush, essentially, on Captain Kirk. She gets jealous and she runs away and schemes with her friends to kidnap Rand, which they do. McCoy, Moy, for goodness sake. McCoy eventually discovers a possible vaccine for the disease, but without the ability to check the dosage with the ship's computers, the vaccine may actually kill the patient. So Kirk gets hold of Miri, tells her that the onlys, the kids, they're going to contract the disease if they do not help him find the cure. And upon realising that she herself is infected, Miri brings Kirk to where Rand has been held. She's been kidnapped. The kids have her at this stage. And at John's urging, the children swarm, gang up on Kirk, and beat the living daylights out of him. And of course, Kirk's not going to fight back against children. He's taking it. They're beating him down. He's injured. He's bleeding. Then he loses it. He just angrily begs the kids to think about the youngest kids that are here who will be helpless, thinking, Mary's infected, John's not a kick in the ass off getting it himself. Who's going to look after the smaller ones once they're gone? And he points out that their food supplies, they're running out. The children will starve within 6 months. That's as simple as that. They're not, even though their lifespans have been extended, they're over 300 years old at this point, they're still in that mindset of a child. They haven't actually properly grown up yet. They're not going to be able to survive. They're not equipped for it. He points out food's gone, you're going to die, 6 months, no food. Convinced, John gives the communicators back to Kirk, and he rounds up the children, and they all return to the laboratory. But in desperation, without the communicators, McCoy has already injected himself with a dose of the vaccine, and luckily gets the right dose. His sores fade, confirming the cure's effectiveness. They will fine tune it, of course, before they give it to anybody else, but McCoy put his life on the line to save everyone else. Back in the Enterprise, after vaccinating everyone and leaving the children in the care of a medical team, Kirk sends for teachers and advisors to help the children improve their lives. That's just a very swift overview of the episode. It's good. It's surprisingly good. I find that a lot with the original shows and Star Trek. It's one of these ones that going into it you think, I wish there was going to be more action involved in it. But the threat from the kids in this episode is, it's an ingenious way to do it. Using the kids as the antagonists of this episode was well done, and it was that thing of, do you remember the childhood taunts, nah, like we all heard it. We've either heard it or we've done it at some point in our childhood, like nah, just winding people up, and that happens a lot throughout this episode. It is definitely probably not one of the best episodes in the entire run of the series, but surprisingly good at the same time. So, definitely, if you've never checked out Star Trek, this is definitely one that will give you that spirit of Star Trek. And there is some slightly cringeworthy moments in it with the whole Kirk and Miri relationship in it, but there's that Dr. McCoy in this episode willing to sacrifice his own safety for everyone around him. That sense of self-sacrifice that was a running thing throughout Star Trek. It's in here in a major way. I really did enjoy it. So that's going to do it for this episode, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and we're going to come back in the next episode with I believe, if memory serves, let me just check me. Okay, we've got one episode to do in season 1 of Star Trek Picard. So as usual on the show, we're going to be bouncing between classic Star Trek series and the newer series that are coming out now. So yes, this podcast is going to go on forever, and I would love it if you would take the journey with me and see what our science fiction shows we're going to do beyond Star Trek when we get to that point. So guys, stay safe, and I'll talk to you in the next episode. This has been a production of Coins